Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on? I'm going back.
Welcome back, everybody. The Bacon and Eggs Show. After a brief hiatus, we're back. Episode 43, right?
We're back.
Yeah, man. Episode 43. This is, it's March now. March 7th, 2021. It's been it's been a year since madness descended upon society, and we're still in it. So
Oh yeah,
it may take different forms, but madness is still around. So
yeah. It surrounds us. It's around us all the time. But you're here to watch the Bacon and Egg Show and escape the madness, and we appreciate that. So thanks for stopping by, man. Kerry, how are you? You good? Everything going all right?
yeah, the weather's better. It's we got out of our Arctic blast there, and
Yeah.
everybody's still recovering from that. But it's yeah, man, doing well. Let's get into it, man. I think let's get back. Let's a little throwback here. Let's get into the cup of coffee to start this off.
Yeah, let's do it. Hey, man. So we got some news, Astros wise, that just sort of came out over the last. It basically a drop
20
today.
minutes or so.
Yeah. So Astros prospect Forrest Whitley has been feeling arm discomfort, but got checked out and basically has been, what was it? The ulnar, what's the word?
Yeah, let me see.
Oh, it's sprained UCL, right? So it's sprained UCL,
Yeah.
which basically, for if you are familiar with baseball injuries or injuries in general, that a sprained UCL usually means Tommy John surgery. So Kerry, Forrest Whitley has been highly touted since joining the Astros organization, but injuries and a brief suspension, he hasn't been able to fully realize that potential thus far. What's your take on how things have, the luck that he's had and how things have gone for him? And it's just,
Yeah.
this is definitely some bad luck for the kid.
Yeah. I think hitting on the luck aspect of it is a pretty big thing when looking at Whitley. It's easy to kind of like go from point A to point B, and without looking too much in the middle, just go like, okay, it's a bust. Like he just hasn't panned out the way that Astros fans would have liked. But yeah, the luck has been terrible. It's I mean, maybe besides the suspension thing, that might be the only thing out of all this that you could really kind of put on him.
Mm-hmm.
And the injuries, and not only that, like it seemed like last year would have been the opportunity for him, and we've discussed this before, like last year would have been the opportunity for him to break through, given what happened with the pitching staff, Verlander going out, just these opportunities. And then you had these other guys from the system surpass him with their performance when they got their shot in Houston. So the luck is terrible. I mean, we've talked about this, about like kind of the clock ticking on his opportunity in Houston. I mean, Tommy John surgery, this is going to be another season written off. Another season in the contract that's gone. And
season and a half.
And at what point does it get to, I don't have the contract numbers or anything right here in front of me, but does it start getting to that point where it's going to, when discussions about renewing, and that the Astros just say like, yeah, I mean, he ends up as part of a trade deal or time to, part ways. Like, I feel like it's getting closer to that.
Yeah. I mean, last year would have been, pardon me, a great time for him to step up, like you said, but even more so this year when you're looking at, last year would have been great because you can throw him out there. Doesn't really matter what happens. You don't really care as long as he doesn't go out there and throw his arm off. Let him get shelled around. It doesn't matter, but he can learn about himself as a pitcher on the mound in major league innings in a season that, you were, Astros were in contention, but it wasn't like it was a good opportunity to put him out there, like you said.
Right.
Now this year, that he would have for sure had opportunities through any sort of injuries even if he didn't make the opening day roster. He's the first guy that's getting a call after if somebody gets hurt. So it would have been there this time to at least see in bulk what the Astros have in Forrest Whitley right now in the major league level. And with this UCL injury, it just seems like like you were saying, it's 12 to 18 months from now before we'll see Whitley. He is getting a second opinion, but the likelihood of that changing anything once you're diagnosed with this sprained ligament in your elbow is pretty low. So I'm already anticipating not seeing him for at least another 18 months, just especially with his setback history and not recovering the way that maybe you'd like him to. It's tough, but we don't have anything to do but sit and wait now and watch until he gets back from injury. But
Yep.
It's tough.
See you after the All-Star break in 22, Forrest.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, that's
tough.
basically what we're looking at there. So
I mean, yeah, exactly. So tough stuff. But man, let's move on to a little bit better. Let's get out of the cup of coffee. Move on to run stock, man. There's been 4 games, right, played since we last met.
Yeah, it's after going with only like a couple games over the course of like a month, we had a rush of games in the last couple weeks kind of making up the schedule. But yeah, I mean, it feels like if you look at it, the big picture from these few games over the last couple weeks, or last 2 weeks, is the Longhorns are starting to come around a little bit, starting to get their groove back that we saw before the COVID break. Yeah, I mean, win over Kansas, going up to Oklahoma and win that, the most recent game going up to OU and beating them.
Mhm.
It's with what was a really fun effort to watch in that game. Like that was, I know we were texting about that in the first half, that Texas OU game, and just the energy, especially on the defensive end of the court,
Absolutely.
the aggression. That was a fun that was a positive sports experience, that game.
That was
a
very
good
much
one.
that was a solid PSE right there for sure. And when even in a second half where they didn't play their best basketball, they did enough to be able to hold on and win a game on the road against a really good team. Like Oklahoma is a second weekend tournament team for me. Like they're a good team, man. And when you need, like, we talk about Sims sometimes as not an afterthought, but I don't think we necessarily discuss Jericho Sims enough as a part of this, like how important he is to the team, like just exactly everything that he brings, whether it's starting the game off hot and getting, and setting the tone before maybe just sort of trailing off after that. Maybe that was his role that game. Against Oklahoma, Sims was a force.
Yeah.
I mean, that was to me, it was the best game since his best game in 4 years in terms of stepping up at times when he was needed the most, setting the tone, being a presence on the glass, being a presence on defense. Like for me, that was Sims' biggest game on the 40 acres, and they needed it. They had to have it. They had to have somebody maybe step up out of the ordinary. That would, in this conference, there's so many good teams. We've talked about this. There's game after game after game. Even that Iowa State game was tougher than it should have been for Texas, just because they're stepping up. It's the Big 12, right? So it's the Big 12.
It's not intramurals.
Yeah. So, but Sims stepped up at a time when his team needed him the most against Oklahoma, and there were some other nice performances in that game. But was there anything else that stood out to you in that Oklahoma game that really?
Greg Brown. I mean, was it like his best, statistical game at Texas? No, but like he was everywhere. Like you could tell that was one of those games. Like you could tell how bad that guy wanted to win at Oklahoma. born and raised Longhorn fan, the whole thing. You can tell just how physical he was playing. He was throwing his body all over the place. How many times in that first half was he, down on the court, banged up? He got that gash under the eye, which was friendly fire, but he was right back in there once, they got the bandage on it and got him back. Like, to me, that was my biggest takeaway was I think he kind of, I don't want to say set the tone because Jericho Sims was a big part of that as well. And like the whole team they were all on like in a mood in Norman that night.
Yeah.
But like, for a guy like Greg Brown, this whole like one and done, these guys don't care, this whole notion about one and dones, for him to go out there and just lay his body out on the line and just get, how bad he must have been hurting that next day. That was the most physical game we've seen from him, I feel like. So that just stood out to me. And if you can get that kind of energy and that kind of passion from Sims, from Brown, from these guys, also I think let's have a thought for Jace Febres too.
Yes,
I want to make sure we mention him, but like
yes,
the physicality and the energy coming from those guys, if they can carry that into the Big 12 tournament, into the NCAA tournament, and they can play with that kind of intensity, then, we'll see where the cards fall. But
yeah, I don't want Greg Brown diving on the floor every night like that. But in a game, like you get what I'm saying. Like I don't necessarily need him to be the floor burn guy every night. That's why you have Brock Cunningham. So I don't. But again, it was almost like he knew it was that moment. And you're right. It wasn't necessarily a pretty game for Brown, but when you're doing all those other things and you're that talented and you're bringing that energy, and I don't care if he's that he's a freshman, he is the most outspoken person on the team. He is the leader of that team. I mean, I know those guards from a perspective of sort of keeping
Coleman
everything
and senior leadership and those things, right?
But when it comes to an emotional leader, it's Greg Brown. And if he can bring that, he can bring that energy. When his energy is there, I don't just mean like, how sometimes Courtney Ramey has a tendency to dribble the ball off his foot and sort of let the air out of the game, sort of have that sort of an impact. It's more from a sense of like, he can not be playing his best and still mean so much to the team. Whereas if Matt Coleman goes 2 for 12, the Longhorns are probably not going to win. So, I mean, like, I agree with you 100%. I'm glad you brought up Brown, and I'm especially glad you brought up Febres because he's hit multiple threes in 2 straight games now. And if Febres can just be that little spark when they need him, that's going to play such a big role come tournament time.
Yeah, you can see the confidence coming back for him, and that's where like maybe he was a little hesitant earlier on in the season. And I think that, probably lent to the lack of playing time, but you're starting to see that confidence come back and he's in turn getting more minutes. And yeah, I mean, you're really that's a bonus for this team. I mean, we've just talked about like, oh, if Febres can contribute, if he can do this, but now we're getting to the point where like, I mean, especially with this Big 12 tournament coming up, to really kind of lock in his place in a rotation and be, I don't want to start saying like, oh, go beyond, I think just him being a constant contributor is great, but if he can be a real difference maker going into the tournament, now you're talking about a completely different story, but I don't want to go, let's not go that far yet.
You're right. But for me, like his minutes are going to come at someone's expense, and it's probably going to be a Brock Cunningham. So like when you're looking at if Febres' minutes, if he's going to get into the 25-minute range, it's going to be those Brock Cunningham. We're not going to see Royce Ham on the floor as much. If Febres, but I think if you're getting a confident Febres, I think that is something that I'm willing to exchange for some of that energy that Cunningham might bring on the defensive end, because the energy that Febres will bring we'll sort of we'll take care. That'll help take care of it. But no, it's just a difference in like the Tech game. Let's go back to that loss, because that was the one loss in the 4-game stretch that Texas had since we met Kerry, and that Greg Brown performance there with playing 13 minutes, and I mean that's what you can't have. Like you can't have a complete no-show, and we've seen it multiple times out of Greg Brown this year. We've seen that goose egg type game where you can score 9 points and not get many rebounds if you're on the floor, if you're bringing energy, if you're playing defense. But the Longhorns can't afford him to completely disappear like that. And that Tech game was just an ugly game to overall. Nobody really seemed to have it going that night anyway. But,
no, and those happen. And Tech's a good team, and that's where you go back to the game where Tech pulled out the win in Austin earlier in the season. And you kind of go, God, you wish you would have been able to get that one, because there's no shame against this Tech program going up to Lubbock and losing a game like that.
Yeah.
But to have them on the ropes in Austin, you got to finish that job. And I know there's been some games like that during that kind of, stretch that the Longhorns had this season where, they were losing a few. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. I feel like the kind of story with this team here, as we have one regular season game left, is like the story for me is controlling the emotions. And that, like, we all see the talent. We all see what's there and the flexibility that Shaka can have with how he wants to implement this team on the court at any given time. But for me, it's the emotion, and to have that like emotion and aggression in Norman against Oklahoma was a huge positive. But then you had the situation where you had like Ramey and, the argument that happened on the court against West Virginia and blow that lead, and then like how they just completely deflated, like the inability to control that emotion with the team at that point. Like, to me, this is about how far this team can go. For me, is about how well their emotions are handled. Going into the tournament, all those things. Greg Brown comes out and gets a couple early fouls in a tournament game, then we're right back talking about, like you said, with Tech, where he's just a non-factor because he's in foul trouble and he's not going to be able to be on the court as much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's the story for me. We all know the talent. This isn't a matter of like if they can, is this team good enough to make some noise? Yeah, they are. They've proven it over the course of this season. But this is about getting these guys dialed in for me, and having them emotionally, like having them the focus and the emotions controlled going into the tournament. You don't want their coming around, running out with their hair on fire and getting early foul trouble, and then you're screwed. Because this is what, to me, that's what we've seen with this team. These games that they've lost, they do these like foul trouble early on, whether it's getting guys like Sims off the court, getting guys like Brown off the court.
Yeah, it's definitely the blueprint. Chop Texas down, make them play small.
And just hope they're cold from three.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, force them to shoot outside jumpers and hope they miss. Like, that's the recipe, right? So if you can force those guys to the sideline, you can get a Sims out early. You can get a Kai Jones out. You can get a Greg Brown out. Like, those are the guys when you start forcing Texas to go smaller when they don't want to. Like, Shaka's done a pretty nice job of dictating how he wants to play. Like you were saying, he has a nice idea. We know what he wants to do with this talent that he has, but it's not necessarily when he wants to make those changes is when it works the best for this team. When it seems like he's forced into making those lineup changes, the result isn't as good. So going, playing TCU tonight. So some of you guys will have watched this show before the game tonight. But basically the scenario is you win, you're the 3 seed in the Big 12. You get 3rd place in the Big 12, which, when we talked in the preseason, like basically said, 3rd and 4th place finish. That means you had a very successful season in the Big 12. And they should handle TCU tonight and secure that third place finish. So when we're looking at this as we're, the Big 12 conference tournament is creeping around the corner next week, and working under the assumption that Texas handles their business tonight, how satisfied are you with a third place finish? And has this team felt like a true, like, does this third place feel as good as maybe in the preseason we thought it might?
Ooh, so yeah, you're working with two questions there, because I think those are interesting, the way that those play against each other. Yeah, preseason we were talking about, like, if this team, there's no shame in this team finishing like in that number 5 spot. You finish in the middle of this Big 12 conference, like that still means you're a really good team and all those things. So if preseason you say Texas is going to finish third in the Big 12, absolutely feeling thrilled about that. And I think they're very deserving of that number 3 spot in the Big 12. But the second part about, like, how does it feel, does it feel like a true, I still get a little hung. There still feels like some missed opportunity this season. Some games that this team should have closed out. You blow a 19-point lead to West Virginia at home. That was an opportunity to get the season sweep over that group, and they're a really good team. The Oklahoma loss in Austin, the Tech game in Austin. Even back earlier in the season, the Villanova game, there was some opportunities for this team to, but again, but what difference would those have really made at this point in the season? This isn't the national, the poll makers, the pollsters, they know what the Big 12 is, and they know what Texas is. So, like, what difference does it really make? You pull out one or two of those wins, and, like, does it really affect where Texas is going to be placed in the postseason? I don't think so. I mean, maybe it changes the way we feel about this team, but I'm happy. I'm very happy with the number 3 spot, the Big 12. I think it's right. I think it's about where this team is when they're playing the way that they should be playing.
I agree, and I think that this definitely doesn't feel like a conference championship type of a team to me. Like, I don't expect them to win the Big 12 tournament. I'm not, I'm not like,
no,
but
no. Baylor's far and away a class above the rest of this conference.
Yeah, and we've seen Texas at their hottest, and that's what it would take to beat Baylor, and that's what it's going to take for Texas to make it far in the big tournament, in the big dance. Is, there's going to have to be a game or two where they just are just hotter than the other team, period.
Yeah,
that's just the nature of this ball club and how they play and how they win ball games. But for me, it feels right. It does feel like the 3, like the 3 spot, even the 4 spot. If something, I would feel kind of bad going into the Big 12 tournament, and then the big dance if they lose to TCU tonight. I think that's a bad loss. But working under the assumption that they take care of business tonight, very.
So what does that do? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What does that do for conference tournament seeding? Let me see. I just want to know, because if Texas finishes 3rd,
then West Virginia would be 4th, and then Oklahoma State would be 5th. So if Texas beats TCU, Texas is 3, West Virginia is 4, Oklahoma State is 5, and then Tech would be 6. So 7 through 10 is decided already.
And 7 through 10 play the first round against each other.
Right. So basically, if Texas wins, it's Texas, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech would be the 3, 4, 5 seeds. So you're looking at Texas with a possible semifinal match in the Big 12 tournament against a Kansas team that I would feel good about going up against again if Texas is playing good basketball. Because they would have to, but they would have to beat a Texas Tech team in that in their first game, which would be what amounts to the quarterfinal. So even then, that's how tough this conference is, man. Like we're talking about having to beat Texas Tech to advance to the semifinals of your conference tournament. This is a tough conference. Like, and that's why these teams with as many losses as they have are ranked so highly. This is just a tough conference, man. And it's
Who was the 5 you said?
Oklahoma State.
Okay, so basically if Texas wins today, get Tech, basically. Or Oklahoma State.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
lose it, you play Oklahoma State. You win, you get Tech. So I mean,
What a
you don't
prize.
have there's not a preference there. Like you just got to go beat a good basketball team.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. It's the Big 12.
I mean, okay. The Big 12 tournament will be wrapped by the time we record again. How much weight do you put on this conference tournament for Texas?
None.
Okay.
It won't bother me if they lose to Tech and if they win into the 3 seed and they lose to Tech and it's just hideous, like it looked in Lubbock, like that
Yeah.
might bother me. That might bother me a little bit. But you lose a tough game there. It doesn't bother me as much as just losing another regular season game. I'm not putting as I shouldn't say none because I just told you why it would, but I'm not putting as I don't need Texas to make it to the finals of the conference tournament. I don't need that.
Yeah, that's I feel like there's plenty to gain for Texas in this conference tournament. Of course, you go on and win the whole thing, that's going to boost their tournament resume that much more. But I don't feel like there's a ton to lose for Texas in this Big 12 tournament. I don't feel like their tournament seeding, the NCAA tournament seeding, is going to be affected if they go out the first game because of how tough the league is. That's just, I mean, I feel like, there's nothing to lose, but plenty to gain. But I almost feel like unless they win the tournament, it's not going to boost their resume all that much more.
It's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
And
I mean, what are they? They're a 3 or 4 seed right now. That they could their ceiling is a 3, their floor is a 4, basically for me.
Yeah.
So that's so we're talking about a second round game against a 6 seed or a 5 seed. I mean,
now that's all with the caveat of beating TCU. You lose to TCU today, then it's a different. I think that has a much bigger bearing on tournament seeding.
I think they would still be a 4 seed. I think Texas would still be a 4, even lose if they lost to TCU and then lost to Tech. Maybe a 5, but I just think with what you're saying, what you've been saying about the schedule and how the way that these guys make these brackets, taking into strength of schedule into consideration and all that stuff. I really don't. I mean, if Texas was a 5 seed, that would be the absolute lowest I could see them being. But even if they lost to TCU, that's what it would take. I think it would have to lose to TCU and then lose ugly to Tech to even drop that far for me. But I think they're comfortably a 4 seed, which obviously in the Sweet 16 puts you up against a 1. So
Hey, as long as they're not facing Baylor in that Sweet 16, I actually would feel pretty good about the matchup there.
There's going to be a couple of 1 seeds that I would probably rather face, but
yeah.
But I mean, you're going to have to beat good teams anyway. So, and this Texas team can beat anybody on any night in the country. I truly believe that if they're playing their best brand of basketball. But what we've seen thus far with this club this season is that we're always not going to get their best brand of basketball every night. So which version of Texas is going to show up tonight against TCU? Which version of Texas will show up on Tuesday or I think it's Wednesday against either Oklahoma State or Texas Tech. Like, which version is it? And once you find that out, you really find out early on in these games. You can just tell by watching the first 5 minutes of these, what version you're going to get tonight. And if it's going to be a knockdown, drag out fight, you're going to have to fight for every point because that's just the way that you're playing tonight. Or if you're going to shoot the lights out of the gym and they're going to be able to keep the energy up. So the ceiling for this team is so high, but we've definitely seen the floor too. And that's what as a Longhorn supporter should worry.
It's always lurking around the corner.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I know next week we're hoping to have a big tournament preview show. So we'll get more into, we'll see how this Big 12 tournament stacks up. And I know next week we're really going to try to dive in and, kind of look at the big national picture with this bracket. And, we won't have the brackets out quite yet, but maybe we could provide a little info for those watching, maybe, win your office pool or, one of those things, provide some of this expert analysis.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to let's talk about some Sluggin Horns. Let's get into some Texas baseball. This is something I know we've been wanting to get into, but just with the insanity of the spring and we've had a basketball team that's been performing at a high level that's been taken, we've been discussing them a lot, as well as the Sarkisian hire and the recruiting. So baseball, we haven't quite had a chance to get into yet, but let's get into it a little bit today. So just to kind of catch everybody up here, I mean, Texas is playing the University of Houston this weekend. The Friday night game was pretty impressive performance, at least on the pitching mound for Texas. Ty Madden with 14 strikeouts and a complete game shutout of U of H. And 1-0 win, which that one run was walked in. So it's a good old time baseball going there, but
yeah. Augie would be proud.
Yeah, which you didn't bunt that run in, but Texas lost game 2 of the series to U of H in extras yesterday, and the rubber game 3 is today. What's the word on this Texas baseball team? They entered the season's top 10, then goes to this whoever put this tournament together is just a masochist in Arlington against what were they ranked at the time? I think I have it here.
7, 8, and 6.
Yeah.
Like it was literally like 4 rankings in a row at the time when Texas was ranked that high as well. And Texas took those 3 losses back to back to start the season. So you're kind of thinking, what's going on? And then trip to Austin from BYU, and you win 3 out of 4, and you sort of start to right that ship and get the bats going a little bit at least, because you definitely didn't see the bats moving against the pitching that they saw against those top 10 ranked teams, but then BYU was the medicine that they needed to sort of get going.
Yeah, and Texas is sitting 19th right now in the rankings. That's probably, I mean, I would say that's pretty fair, and I say there's still a bit of respect that comes with that after the way that those games in that opening season tournament went. Like that would have been a really easy opportunity for the polls to say like, let's go ahead and toss you out of here and wait, till you work yourself back into the top 25. But number 19, and then they, like you mentioned, get the 3 out of 4 versus BYU. Bats came alive. Should have, like you said, probably swept that series. BYU edged out the last game 5-4. Put up a 12-1 spot against A&M Corpus, midweek game, and then a 10-3 pretty impressive win against Texas State and San Marcos. And Texas State's got a hell of a baseball program. Like that's a good win. That's a good team.
That's another, having these back-to-back midweek games against different opponents is, I always love having our student athletes doing things like that. But Texas State is a good program. They're definitely somebody that's there at the end of every season, and you hear them making the tournament at the end of the year. And then Houston, So Kerry, my takeaway from this is, so against good pitching, those are 3 SEC teams that Texas went up against in that opening little tournament there, and good pitchers there, right? And then BYU comes to town, and you get the first game is 3-1, and then the bats come alive. You score 12 runs, then you score 11 runs, and then even you score 4 runs in a loss. So at least you were swinging the bat a little bit. The quality of pitching goes down. We see the Longhorns go up a little bit. Okay, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, you scored 12. Again, maybe not maybe not the Friday night pitcher that they saw against Houston, who held them to the 1 run. So I think right now what I would like to see out of this team is to put together not just a game, but a couple of games in a row in a series against a quality opponent. And not just from a fielding perspective, not just from a pitching perspective, but the bats need to come alive. For me, is what I would like to see anyway. And, the schedule, we were looking at the schedule earlier before we got on, and it's definitely backloaded in terms of conference play and the toughest teams, at least right now in the rankings. So it seems like Texas may have a little bit of time to figure it out, but if they're going to be successful in Big 12 play this year, I would think that they would need to get these bats going like now.
Yeah, and I just wanted to
not waiting for the middle of the conference play. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to provide a quick little update on. We mentioned the rankings of those teams to open up the season, and they were the 7, 8, and 6 teams in the country. Well, now Mississippi State's number 3 in the country, Arkansas is number 1, and Ole Miss is number 4.
So there you go. That's what I'm, even more so, like that is the best of the best that you're looking at right now. And Texas didn't do well against them. So as the schedule starts to toughen up, that's something that I'll be looking out for is how do the bats respond against better teams and against better pitching?
Yeah. And honestly, you wouldn't see that tough of a 3-game run in Omaha.
No, you wouldn't.
So like, it's not like not making excuses or anything. That's just brutal. Like that is a brutal run to open up the season. Yeah. So, but yeah, on the schedule thing, South Carolina is going to be coming to town soon. They're 14th in the country. And I think that's going to be a really good test at home.
Yep.
In the comforts of Dish Falk to be able to like, maybe, if you get 2 out of 3 versus South Carolina before heading into conference play, I think that's going to be really encouraging. And I think, yeah, as for the bats, I think we've kind of talked about this with the Astros before. Like, you don't have to put up 12. You don't have to put up 12 runs, but like consistently getting guys on base, moving them around the bases, just showing that the offense can be consistent and you can put the bat on the ball and get it in play. And that the amount of strikeouts in that opening 3-game tournament, yeah. Again, top tier pitching. I mean, what can you do? But yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of like, well, I don't want to compare it to basketball because we kind of knew what the basketball team was coming into the season. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of young talent on this baseball team that, we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, by the end of the season, the series that they have in conference versus Tech and Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, those are going to be telling. It's going to decide it, and you just hope to be there in the end, be one of those teams competing for a regional.
Well, and David Pierce is going to play these young guys. He doesn't care what your classification is. Like if you're going to help this ball club, he's going to put you on the field. So like we're gonna, we've seen some of them get some playing time early. We've seen some of them shine in some spots and come up big, and others not as much. So I think Pierce is sort of figuring out who his go-to guys are going to be once conference play really ramps up, and I think you'll see those lineups start to steady out a little bit. We'll see some more consistent lineups out of them as they go into conference play, and Pierce will have found his guys that that he's most comfortable running out there with, especially over a weekend series. So that's South Carolina. Get through the Houston game today, which is 1:30 on ESPN Plus. So if you have the Plus, check it out
on your dial.
on your television dial. And then you got Sam Houston on the two as a midweek game, but that's at home. Like Texas has not had to travel very far at all. Starting this season off in Arlington with that murderer's row of a tournament, and then Austin for BYU, Austin for A&M Corpus Christi, just going to San Marcos for Texas State, Houston for Houston, obvious for U of H, Sam Houston and South Carolina, and then UT Rio Grande Valley are all at home. Then they have to go to Waco, and then midweek games at home. Oklahoma is at home. Then they have the one midweek game in College Station. They don't really have to travel at all, and they're going to Kansas on April 1st.
Yeah.
So this Texas team, in my mind, they're not having to put in the miles on the road. They're not having to do all of those things. If they can get into a rhythm, if you want to compare it to the basketball team, compare it to this team being able to get into a rhythm like Texas basketball has now. And then we'll see if the Sluggin Horns can get those bats going and keep them going. And then on the nights when they can't, does that pitching come through? We've seen this when we've seen the Longhorn baseball team as a successful team throughout the years. It always seems like when the bats aren't there, the pitching has picked them up. And when the pitching's not there, the bats are alive, and all the stars align. And we'll see if Coach Pierce can dial up the right sort of combinations and things like that, because I think there's quite a bit of talent on this club. It's there. This is still Texas baseball. The talent's there. So as we get into closer and closer to conference play, we'll see how this team's running out.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the travel aspect of this, because even going beyond that Kansas series when they go to Lawrence, further on in the season, it's just a trip to Stillwater for a 3-game set and to Fort Worth. That's it. I mean, the West Virginia series to close out the season's in Austin. They don't have to go to Morgantown. Save that trip. The Tech, no trip to Lubbock. That's going to be in Austin. Like those are like same thing with K-State. There's no trip to Manhattan involved there. Again, it's in Austin. So you really talk about being able to like take advantage of the friendly confines and short road trips.
Right. Yeah.
So, maybe that's a detriment. Maybe they don't have that long road trip or something that team bonds or whatever. I don't know. But like,
yeah, but then you go on a long road trip and you get your ass kicked, and then it sucks coming back, and then it's
it can go both ways.
Yeah. So I would rather have a schedule like it's lining up for them this season than anything else. If I could stay close to home all the time, I would much rather do that. I mean, think from April 6th all the way until April 18th. Like there's just 10 straight 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 straight games, and then you go to San Marcos. That's a great time to really get into a rhythm, and for these young players to be able to contribute in places that they're comfortable. So that it'll be interesting to see, because they are a good team. I mean, there's a reason, like you said, that they're still ranked as high as they are after really stinking it up in that first weekend series against some really, really great teams. But Texas is still a good baseball team.
Yeah, I just noticed that trip to San Marcos. Yeah, 420 at Texas State. That's mark that on your calendars. A little baseball trip down to San Marcos on 420. But that's it.
Might not head down to Sewell Park ahead of time. Maybe hang out. No, never mind.
I don't know.
No. No, that's
that will. We'll discuss that later on.
Yeah.
Maybe film a show from out there, live broadcast 420 from San Marcos.
From Sewell Park out there. Yeah, that would be something.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not, actually? Yeah.
Yeah.
Weather will be nice. And so
I'm sure it will be.
Well, man, what else we got? Let's see. We got JJ Watt signing with the Cardinals. You want to hit on that at all, or are we gonna?
I'm happy for the guy, and it's I'm glad he was able to get out of the absolute cesspool that is the Houston Texans franchise, and I hope Watson's out next, because I like those guys as players. Like they're the kind of guys that you would want on your roster. Like I know Watt is in the latter stages of his career. He's not the guy that he once was, but he's still going to probably give Arizona 8 sacks this year. Like there's no doubt, and he'll probably make a big play at one point in the season and change the entire and win them a game or something like that. Like he's still that good. And then Watson is just, he's the dude. Like he basically willed this franchise as far as Bill O'Brien would let him, while dragging him down forcefully from behind. So I hope they go out and be successful. But Watt signing with the Cardinals, for me, I might have a new team to follow, man. Like you got Hopkins over there, you got Watt over there, you got a good young quarterback in Kyler Murray. I mean, this is it's gonna be another, it's gonna be exciting to watch out there if Kingsbury can put it together. It can, figure it out. But I'm not. We've seen is that before. I want to get your take on the Watt thing. But has anybody failed up better than Cliff Kingsbury?
It helps to be handsome, man.
I mean, honestly,
it helps to be a good-looking dude.
I'm not saying that he still can't be a successful NFL coach consistently, but man, like, I don't know. I think, it's almost like he's shown us exactly who he is and time again, and people won't believe him. But
yeah, I mean, we talk about a guy that at Tech had Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, and Davis Webb all in the same quarterback room, and he still couldn't lose, less than 5 or 6 games a season.
Right. Yeah. So, but anyways, what's your take on the Watt stuff, man? Like, are you, how do you feel about all that?
I think it's a good landing spot for him. I was a little surprised actually that it was Arizona, given like how we had talked about Green Bay or Pittsburgh, and Chicago was in the mix, and like these kind of like, I don't know. I was kind of surprised, but it makes sense. I mean, it's a good landing spot for them. They're competing. They're a team that should be competing for that division, which is to your point about Kingsbury. Like if he can figure it out, because the talent's there, and now the pressure's building. But I think if Russell Wilson leaves the division,
bingo,
that's going to open it up more. And who knows what Stafford's going to be with the Rams. And at that point, I don't know what the 49ers are going to be. Maybe Deshaun Watson ends up in San Francisco. That's a place that's been mentioned as a landing spot for him. I mean, if Deshaun Watson goes to play in San Francisco with Shanahan, then that changes the complexion. It might be the most entertaining division in football next year, honestly.
It could. If certain quarterbacks stay and other quarterbacks come, and I mean, like it. But either way, I think that division is up for grabs. Like, I think that's a division that any of those teams could win if the bounces go their way. So
exactly,
it's the NFC West has been like that though for a while. Even when they weren't all good, like even when Seattle was winning the NFC West with a losing record, it was because it was almost like, well, yeah, this was up for grabs again this year. Any of these teams could have won this division. Now, San Francisco, like the 3 different division winners of the last 3 years, when you get the Rams in 2018, who then went to the Super Bowl, the 49ers who won it in 2019 and then lost in the Super Bowl, and then the Seahawks lost in the wild card last year to the Rams. But I mean, like, there are good teams in this division. And when you look at Arizona as a team, like it's almost like they're on the cusp. And sometimes when your head coach's ceiling has already been met, as we saw with the Houston Texans, maybe they've already seen Cliff Kingsbury's ceiling in Arizona, and he's not going to be the one to get them over the hump, even with a very promising young quarterback in Kyler Murray. So it will be an exciting division to watch, and I agree. Like it is a good spot for him in a sense where he's going to have chances to make plays in games that matter throughout the whole season.
Right. Yeah, and God, I just think that like the story of this offseason with the quarterback carousel in the NFL is just extremely fascinating to me. It's we already saw it with the Stafford Goff deal, where Russell Wilson potentially leaving Seattle, the Drew Brees situation in New Orleans, Deshaun Watson, like, not to mention with the draft, you got Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson is kind of being thrown around these number 1 and number 2 picks. This is going to be a crazy offseason. And
Yep.
I mean, it already is, but like when the music stops and we start getting into training camp and we see where all these different quarterbacks are, like it's going to be crazy to evaluate. Like, just because, like, who knows at this point where Deshaun Watson's going to end up?
Yeah.
And how much does the Russell Wilson trade potentially alter the market for that?
Oh yeah. The landscape of this entire league could look completely different by May. You know, like this is not, or earlier than that even. Like this is not it's not out of the realm of possibility for 3 or 4 of these big name quarterbacks to be in different places. You know, by the time mini camps are running. So yeah, no, good for Watt, man. Like I said, you know, we've sort of talked about on this show. I don't know how much time and energy I'm going to drop into a Houston Texans franchise anymore. That I know exactly what, you know, like what you see is what you get, and it's not a very well-run franchise at this moment. So, you know, it might take a little more interest in Arizona and follow them a little bit, but we'll see, man. It's going to be an interesting offseason, and these, you know, it's a weird combine. You know, the draft process is weird this year too, because like combine stuff is different. It's just another one of those weird years where players are really going to be evaluated on their tape and then just straight measurables, rather than, you know, all of the put them through the ringer and the T-shirt Olympics that they go through over there on the with the combine. So
Yeah, I saw some. I feel like I saw some quote. I don't know if it was like some anonymous GM or scout, something like that, that was asked about the virtual virtual combine thing and like how it's going to play a difference, and they were like, it doesn't matter because everything's already on tape anyway.
bingo. Yeah.
And that these, you know, it's just kind of making themselves feel useful going to the combine to like, oh, well, you know, hand size, and, you know, we're going to sit in a 3-hour interview to just ask them over and over how much they truly love football and try to find like, and it's just stuff like that where you kind of go like, God, the combine was kind of useless, wasn't it? Like, just put the tape on. I mean, sure, you might discover like some guys from smaller schools that maybe didn't get noticed, but like, it's like with Sam Ellinger. What is Sam Ellinger going to do at the combine that you didn't see over 4 years on the field?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, what do you like, especially with Twitter now? We just saw the other day he threw a ball 77 yards. I didn't need to set up a combine for him to watch his arm strength. His agent or whoever it was posted it on Twitter. Like, this is not a thing where you have limited access to these players anymore and you're watching grainy ass tape from 3 years ago against a non-Power 5 school. No, it doesn't. It's not like that anymore. You made your
Yeah,
evaluations of these players.
we've
At
seen
this
Sam
point,
Ellinger throw downfield.
right? Exactly. Like you know what's there. Like this is not none of this. The combine is at this point for me. It was just a television spectacle, and like
Yeah,
you have guys run 40s there and they bumped up their draft stock. Yeah, but you can run a 40-yard dash in your front, you know, down your street and time it. And, you know, like,
send in your
not that they
tape.
would your tape, man, you know, like these guys have access to expensive, you know, laser track technology where they could time themselves, you know, running a 40. Like this isn't, you know, some of them do, not all of them, but you know, like some of these guys where if they, you know, they have good agents, they're going to get them access to that because they're going to want them to boost their stock in the draft. So anyways, man, yeah, I used to love the combine stuff. It fascinated me, and the more I've seen it, the more I'm like, they don't care. This is, yeah, the numbers are great. I like it because I love statistics. I love numbers, but these guys know these guys have been evaluated. Like this is not, it's not changing for
Right.
every one guy that it actually helped, you know, changes their draft stock. there's 100 others that are, they're already on people's boards and they're not moving. So
Right.
they've already have a 3rd round grade on that guy. It doesn't matter. So.
Yeah, it's changed with the exposure over the years, So
Yeah, I mean, you can watch Central Michigan play Richmond on ESPN Plus in high definition.
crystal clear.
Like, so you don't there is no guessing anymore. Like,
No.
you see if there's a guy with talent, eyes are already on him. It's already happened. So anyways, yeah, that's just, yeah, good for JJ to bring it back full circle. Good for JJ. That's it. Sam Ellinger can throw the ball 77 yards in the air if you didn't know. What else? What else to put a ball in this thing? Anything else?
No, man, I think that's it. I know there's no Austin FC news this week, really. The team's in training and, we'll get it hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have a schedule and we can discuss that. But otherwise, I think that's it for this week, man.
Yeah, good stuff. Good show. Always good stuff. And by the time we talk again, we're going to effort to have Longhorn Insider Mike Holland on to talk big dance tournament stuff. Yeah, to see when he can get him on for a little preview action and to also get his take on what the Longhorns look, not just from a national perspective, but to really get his take on how the Longhorns have looked over the past few weeks and what his predictions are for them moving into the tournament. And we'll give you ours as well. And hopefully we're feeling good about a Texas basketball team that has really started to play with rhythm and play at a high level again. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Hopefully we can pull that off. Have a nice tournament preview show. So yeah, man, this has been good. Yeah, let's do it again next week.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hook 'em.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all.
ATX representing Fatal, baby.
All in 06 on a Saturday. Can it drip and swing us